Committee will be in order, and I want to welcome each of you this evening where we're going to entertain H.R. 1549, Helping Sick Americans Now Act. And we're delighted to have the gentleman, Mr. Pitts, gentleman, Mr. Plone, from the Subcommittee on Health, Energy and Commerce Committee, and would like to ask both of you please to come on up to the table. Today we're going to meet on this important bill, which is a unique opportunity to help over 107,000 Americans to ensure that they continue to receive the health care that they desperately need while simultaneously defending and defunding one of the most egregious and politically motivated slush funds in the Obamacare. H.R. 1549, the Helping Sick Americans Now Act of 2013, diverts money from the Preventative and Health Care Fund, Public Health Fund, to transferring it to the Pre-Existing Conditions Insurance Plan. The insurance plan operates high-risk pools which allow Americans with pre-existing conditions to gain the medical coverage which they need to acquire. Without objection, the rest of my statement will be entered into the record. I want to thank both of you for being here today. The ranking member of the committee has indicated she's interested in us continuing our drive, as you know that we're meeting later than we normally would, and she is intensely interested as a result of constituent meetings that she has, and I know all of us are in that same position. So without objection, I'd like to enter into the record any written testimony that you have at this time, and would ask the gentleman to summarize their remarks as they choose. Gentleman, Mr. Pitts is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, during the last several years there have been few areas of agreement between Republicans and Democrats on how health care should be reformed to better serve patients. From the beginning, however, one area that both sides have designated as a top priority is coverage for those with pre-existing conditions. One of the central promises of the Affordable Care Act was that those with pre-existing conditions would be able to get coverage. The Affordable Care Act provided $5 billion for the Pre-Existing Condition Insurance Plan, or PSIP as I'll refer to it, to help cover sick Americans until the exchanges were up and running January 1, 2014. At the time, Republicans claimed that the $5 billion was not enough to cover the population. In the Republican alternative to ACA, we proposed $25 billion over 10 years to aid Americans suffering from pre-existing conditions through new universal access programs that reformed and expanded state-based high-risk pools and reinsurance programs. On February 15th, 2013, CMS announced that it was suspending enrollment in PSIP due to financial constraints, despite the fact that enrollment in the high-risk plans was less than 30% of what had been expected. By some estimates, 40,000 individuals would have enrolled in PSIP during the remainder of this calendar year. CMS is now trying to stretch what is left of the initial $5 billion to cover those already enrolled in the program until January 1 of next year. On March the 5th, the Speaker, Leader Cantor, Whip McCarthy, Conference Chair McMorris Rogers, Chairman Upton, Dr. Burgess, and I sent a letter to the President asking that he redirect funding from the other ACA accounts to PSIP to allow the program to continue accepting new enrollees. To date, we've received no response. On April 3rd, the Energy and Commerce Health Subcommittee held a hearing entitled Protecting America's Sick and Chronically Ill, which examined the problems with PSIP and explored ways to help Americans with pre-existing conditions obtain affordable health coverage. On April 10th, the President's FY 2014 budget request was released, and here the President had the opportunity to include funding for PSIP for the last 3 months of this calendar year and chose not to. And that's why I introduced H.R. 1549 on April 15th. My bill is quite simple. It redirects funding from Obamacare's Prevention and Public Health Fund to PSIP, allowing continued enrollment for those with pre-existing conditions through the end of this year, lifting the restriction that individuals must be without insurance coverage for 6 months before they can enroll, and helping to reduce the deficit. The full Energy and Commerce Committee marked up H.R. 1549 on April 17th. Dr. Burgess offered a perfecting amendment, which was approved by voice vote, and the bill was reported favorably by a vote of 27 to 20. We need to prioritize sick Americans first, and I can think of no better use for this funding than to provide coverage to those Americans who cannot get insurance due to their pre-existing conditions and who cannot wait until January 1, 2014 for the rest of the ACA to kick in. On my amendment, it would eliminate spending of the prevention fund for fiscal year 2017 and beyond. It would authorize state-based high-risk pools for 2014 with changes to provide states more flexibility to operate their pool as they see fit. $5 billion would be authorized for these state-based pools. This amendment, with savings from the underlying bill, would reduce the deficit by $8 billion. So I urge support. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Pitts, thank you very much. I will also note that to Mr. Pallone, the gentleman chose to take his time also to talk about his amendment, and I would encourage the gentleman as he chose to do that. And we welcome, once again, to the Rules Committee, the gentleman from New Jersey, Frank Pallone. Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am going to try to summarize both my, well, let me say this. I'm not opposed to the basic idea that we should extend the high-risk pool, or PSIP, as my colleague has explained it. In fact, when we had the hearing in Energy and Commerce in our Health Subcommittee last week, both Democrats and Republicans were in favor of extending PSIP, till 2014, when pre-existing conditions are no longer an issue because they're not allowed once the ACA kicks in. The problem is the pay-for. I do not think that we should have the prevention fund as a pay-for, and I'll tell you briefly why. And my amendment, Mr. Chairman, would basically replace that pay-for with a 4-cent increase per pack on cigarettes. The prevention fund, as I think many of you know, when it was set up by the Affordable Care Act, we've already dipped into it several times over the last few years to pay for other things, and I always oppose that. If this bill were to become law, the prevention fund would have no money whatsoever for the next 4 years. So now we're not only dipping into it, we're saying it wouldn't be around for the next 4 years at all. And Mr. Pitts, Chairman Pitts, also had a separate amendment, which I also oppose, which, if you remember, would eliminate the prevention fund altogether, not only for the next 4 years, but beyond, all right? I think it makes no sense. I mean, it's a situation where we set up, and the whole purpose of the Affordable Care Act, and I think of all of us in general, is to try to prevent illness. The reason these people have chronic diseases and are high risk, the people we're trying to address by expanding PSIP, is in many cases because they didn't have any prevention. They didn't see a doctor. They didn't catch the disorder early enough. And the whole idea of the prevention fund, and I think of everything we try to do in healthcare, is to eliminate people getting sick, going to the hospital, having to go to the emergency room. Prevention fund is designed to give grants to states, and New Jersey has benefited greatly, to do preventative things, whether it's for breast cancer, or in New Jersey we've gotten money for breast cancer prevention, for other types of cancer prevention, for heart disease. Now, of course, what I'm suggesting with my amendment is use a cigarette tax, which is the opposite. I mean, every indication is with the cigarette tax is that by making people smoke less, you prevent them from getting heart disease and cancer and everything else. So what I'm saying is let's not eliminate this prevention fund. Let's find a pay-for that actually helps prevent disease, particularly these high-risk chronic diseases that often can be prevented if people acted sooner or had some knowledge about what to do with their lives. I think I'll leave it at that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Mr. Pallone, is the President aware that he personally has spoken on this issue and now is not funding it?
Not funding what again? The prevention fund?
Is the President aware that this fund will run out and that it is not being funded through the remainder of the year?
Let me explain. As Chairman Pitts said, the Secretary of Health and Human Services at some point determined that there wasn't enough money left to continue this and continue to enroll people for the rest of the year. And so that's why we're here. No one argues, Mr. Chairman, about the need to extend this till the end of 2014. I'm simply making the case over the pay-for. Let me make that clear.
Well, I'm just trying to establish for the record that the President of the United States is aware that he is the one that sold this plan It's now deficit. Does he have any ideas about how he's going to cover it?
I haven't gotten anything from the White House about pay-fors. But again, as you know, there are a lot of people who are high risk, and it's very hard when you're putting these things together to determine whether you have enough money. And as you know, we were under constraints with the Congressional Budget Office to come in at, I guess, less than $1 trillion in terms of the ACA. And there just wasn't enough money. I don't know what else to tell you.
Well, this sounds like I've heard people attack insurance companies for being too expensive and not covering people many, many, many times. And this seems like the reverse. You took money from people and now not even going to give them what you had told them you were going to do.
Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't want you to misunderstand what I'm telling you. Maybe you're not, but I want to be clear. It was a question of enrollment. The people that are enrolled in the program are getting coverage. It was just that at some point they stopped enrolling people. And what we're doing...
I get that, but
okay.
There's money from the taxpayers of this country, and we were all told by the President that this was one of the attributes of this system, and it was blatantly unfair not to cover these people. And now the President is aware of it. The testimony tonight says the President is well aware of it and has no explanation about how to extend the coverage. So, Mr. Pitts, you're here to have to do that on behalf of these people who the President had extended coverage to.
That's
and now
correct.
offers no advice or consent on how to get that done.
That's correct. We had a hearing. We had one witness, mother of two, who had lymphoma. She was speaking for a number of patients. She had her application all filled out, ready to drop it when they closed and stopped taking, people to be covered. So she can't get insurance. The President had a chance to fund PSIP for the last 3 years of this calendar year, which would have been the first 3 months of his FY14 budget. He chose not to put any funding for PSIP in that budget.
Yeah. Well,
Mr. Chairman, you understand, and again, I don't know, there is the money that was in the ACA to fund this did run out. You understand that?
I do get that. But when insurance companies run out and they still they had coverage to do, you would expect them to go do what they were supposed to do.
But that's what we're proposing.
Yeah, well, I know we're proposing it, so good. You did say you're here to help do the right thing.
Right.
But we got to get it done. And so I admire both of you for being here. Evidently, that's a good idea that we'll all vote for this thing because we all believe that the President of the United States was doing the right thing. It was a bipartisan agreement, initiative, and now one of the parties is backing out. I'm not backing out. Mr. Bishop?
Look, I only have two questions. The first one for you, Mr. Pallone. In the dissenting views, it was said that this was a continuation of the Republican war on Obamacare, or the ACA. So I'd like you, if you could, just to amplify what you meant by that. And
I apologize. You got to tell me again. What are you asking me?
Well, the dissenting views said that this bill is an attempt to continue the Republican war on the ACA.
Oh, in the dissenting views.
Let me ask both questions.
Sure.
Go for it. Mr. Pitt, the only thing I have heard from some people deals with the constitutionality of obviously having a federalized program dealing in this issue. So if you could just address how you would respond to those who claim you can do this to assist states to come up with a program, but to federalize it exceeds the bounds of that Constitution. So those are the two questions. Mr. Pallone?
Well, again, my concern is that this prevention fund, which was really the hallmark of not only the Affordable Care Act, but I think what all of us want to do. I mean, Mr. Pitts never suggests that we not do preventative or that the basis for any healthcare system shouldn't be prevention. We're all designed to do that. I mean, I remember when I was before you years ago when President Bush proposed expanding the community health care, the community health centers. And the President's whole mantra was that he wanted a prevention. He wanted people to go and see a doctor, go to a community health center, and we expanded and spent a lot of money. I mean, the point I'm trying to make is, why do you go after, as a pay-for, the very fund that is sort of the hallmark of what we're trying to do? And it's not like you're just skimming it. It would literally take all the money away for the next 4 years, and Chairman Pitts' proposal in the amendment is to eliminate it altogether. in perpetuity. And all I'm saying is...
So make the connection. How is that then an effort to destroy Obamacare?
Well, because if you don't have any prevention, then people are going to end up going to the emergency room, going to a hospital, going to a nursing home, and their costs of all that are going to be prohibited. Remember, with the ACA, we tried to keep this within a certain bounds in terms of cost. If your costs start to skyrocket because people don't take preventative measures or see a doctor on a regular basis, then you're not going to be able to cover anybody. In other words, look, we all recognize the fact that there are limitations in terms of how much money we have. I think Mr. Pitts and I are saying that we don't want these high-risk people to not be covered between now and the end of the year. We're talking about, this 6 or 7 months. But all I'm saying is let's not do it at the expense of prevention. That's the simple argument that I'm making.
All right. Mr. Pitts?
Article 1, Section 8, the Commerce Clause, is the justification, that we use for offering this. And both the federal and the opportunity for states to set up high-risk pools as well that the grants would be available for. As far as the prevention fund is concerned, it has been misused for things that are not prevention at all. Recently, the Secretary said she plans to use $54 million for hiring navigators to help people get on the Affordable Care Act, and $304 million is to be used for advertisements as far as the Affordable Care Act. But in the past, they've used it for things like, and I'll quote here, signage to promote recreational destinations, including public park bike lanes and more in North Carolina, free pet spaying and neutering in Nashville, gardening projects in Boston, lobbying for soda tax in New York, fast food construction in California, increased cigarette taxes in South Carolina, improved walking and biking environment in Seattle. So it has been abused as far as the use of this prevention fund in the past, and we would like to use it for the chronically ill.
Thank you.
Well, I don't know if you have any time left.
Apparently I do. Go ahead.
Look, the problem that I have, and I said this at the hearing, I have a lot of respect for Chairman Pitts, but we keep, on the Republican side, he and others keep saying they want to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And over again, we get efforts to defund it, repeal sections, repeal the whole thing. I mean, obviously, I'm not going to sit here and talk about the specific items that he mentioned, because the prevention fund has been overwhelmingly used for very good things. I mean, in New Jersey, it's been used, as I said, for pilot programs for breast cancer, for heart disease, for all kinds of things directly related to trying to prevent people from getting sick. The problem, though, is I just think it's wrong for the GOP to continue to say we want to repeal it, we want to defund it, and then start criticizing the Secretary because she's using it in some cases to get out information about the Affordable Care Act. I mean, you can't just constantly say we don't like this bill, we want to repeal it, and we want to defund it, and then come back and say, oh, you don't want to get the information out. I mean, I just don't think that's fair.
Thank you. I apologize for almost cutting you off. You kind of zeroed in on the answer to my question at the second time you spoke. I'll yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Slaughter?
I'm not going to say anything more than I say every week, is we're just kind of spinning our wheels here. This is not going to be a two-house bill, and it should, by some strange turn of fate, become a two-house bill. The President will veto it. I don't think there's anything more to say, except this is only going to be seated by that bill tomorrow, the helium bill. I've run out of saying it costs $24 million a week to run the House, the Congress, and that we don't have much to show for that. So I will hold off till tomorrow.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Fox, do you wish to be recognized?
No, thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. McGovern.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to ask unanimous consent to insert in the record the statement of administration policy in which it says if the President is presented with this legislation that would effectively repeal the Prevention and Public Health Fund for 2013 through 2016, his senior advisors would recommend that he veto it.
That objection.
Yeah, and I'm going to follow the ranking member's example here, but I just would say this. I think if we're all concerned about health care and we're interested in trying to find ways to make it work, if this were truly a genuine effort to do that, I think we would not be talking about a bill that is not going to see the light of day in the Senate and would be vetoed by the President. So, and I'll just, one final thing, this sequestration is beginning to take its toll all throughout this country. And I would respectfully suggest to my friends on the other side who control the agenda of this House to move that up as a priority, because we're now seeing some of the significant negative impacts of that, and I think our time would be better spent on that. But I have no questions.
Thank you very much. Mr. Cole.
Two quick questions to either of you. First, I fail to see how you're defunding the bill if you're actually using part of the money for the bill to fulfill a purpose of the bill, where there's admittedly a shortfall. So I'd love to get either of your response to that question.
Well, look, again, it goes back to the same thing. I'm saying that there's an alternative funding source that actually will prevent people from getting chronic diseases.
Get to that question. But, we're not really defunding the bill here.
Well, if you don't have
to take money out of the bill, it's actually an effort to shift money that's already set aside for what I would argue is a more pressing purpose, which is people with existing preconditions.
But gentlemen, the problem is this. If you're really going to prioritize prevention, you have to have some money to deal with diabetes, obesity, chronic heart disease, all these other things. I understand that we always want to help people that are in bad shape, and that's what we're trying to do here by extending the PSIP. But it's easy, and I'm not trying to be difficult. It's easy to say, okay, we have this group of people that need this help in the next 8 months, so let's make sure we help them. And the prevention fund, that's long term. I can't necessarily worry about that right now because that's in long term. But the problem is, and I'm not saying that you're thinking that way, but my fear is that if that's what we do, if we say, okay, let's just use this now, and then we don't have any money for prevention over the next 4 or 10 years, then we never get to prevention. And I'd rather come up with a source of funding that directly will impact and reduce the incidence of heart disease, like a cigarette tax. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. Cole, the reason what you say is right is reflected in the letter that we received from 18 different groups in a coalition supporting this. These are our advocates, patient advocates group, that are urging us to support the bill. So they recognize that this is basically move funding from one part of the bill to the other.
The second quick question, and this to your point, Mr. Pallone, and this is just out of curiosity, is there a germaneness issue here with your fix? It hasn't gone, it's a tax, hasn't gone through Ways and Means.
Well, I know that it wasn't in order in Energy and Commerce because we don't deal with taxes, but I don't see any reason why you in the Rules Committee couldn't put it in order. I don't think that affects what you do in rules. Can I just say,
it wouldn't normally be what we do here. We wouldn't normally move tax legislation to the floor from here.
Well, no, I know you don't normally do that. You normally wait for the committees, but I think it's something you can do. Just an example. You and I deal with Native Americans all the time, and I know you yourself are actually Native American. But I go around and I see the incidence of diabetes, right? And so, one of the things that I would like to do is to set up programs where people have a better diet, so they don't get obese and end up with diabetes. So that's like what the prevention fund is set up for. Things like that would, teach people how to eat better or do things better to prevent them from getting chronically ill.
Yeah, I'm
sure you relate.
I'm not arguing against your point in that regard at all. It just seems to me you've got a very pressing need here. You've got a limited amount of money, and it looks to me like that's what Mr. Pitts is trying to achieve, just to move the money within the context of the bill, which is what the bill is about. So, I don't think this is part of some sort of continuing war against the bill. I think it's a genuine good faith effort. You both actually agree that this is a problem that needs to be fixed. You're just disagreeing over the way to deal with it in the short term or immediately. So if you have no further response, I'll yield back my time.
Thank you very much. Mrs. Fox.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I intended to recognize two guests that I have in the audience tonight, Keith and Vicki Lane. They are from Eden, North Carolina, in Rockingham County. They're former constituents of mine, and I am pleased that they've spent a couple of days in Washington seeing the sights here and spent some time here in the Capitol. Keith is a pharmacist, and Vicki is a flight attendant, and I think they're both very interested in what happens in our government, and I thank them for being here. Thank you.
Thanks, gentlemen. Keith and Vicki, welcome to the Rules Committee. We're delighted that you're here. The Vice Chairman, the gentleman, Mrs. Fox, has probably more visitors than about anybody else combined, and we're delighted that you've been able to join us, and thank you for taking time to be here this evening. Mr. Woodall.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I read the statement of administration policy, but I confess I don't know. What did the President do in his budget about this, the lack of funding in this section? I know you have a proposal, Mr. Pallone, about how to fix it. Mr. Pitts has a proposal. What was the President's proposal?
The President budget included no money for PSIP in the first 3 years, which are the last, 3 years of his budget, which are the last 3 months of his budget, which are the last 3 months of PSIP's existence. PSIP goes out of existence in 8 months. So he did not fund it.
Was that a reflection of a loss of confidence in the program because of the way it has run out of money?
If I could respond, no. It's quite clear that the administration would like to see the program extended. You know, I don't know if you can I take up a little of your time and respond? I understand. You know, you both said we have the common cause but two different pay-fors. But as Mr. McGovern said, or Ms. Slaughter said, you know, if this passes the House tomorrow, it's not going to pass in the Senate. I think it would make more sense for us to, you know, Mr. Pitts and I, to sit down with the administration and try to come up with a pay-for that we can agree with on a bipartisan basis and then move forward. I think in many ways that tomorrow becomes an exercise in futility if we just have an up or down vote on, you know, on the bill that's before you, because I don't see, I mean, we didn't have any Democrats supported in committee, and I don't think any, if very few, would support it on the floor. So I think it would make more sense if all of you wanted to just say, look, go back and try to work this out rather than just bringing up this bill tomorrow that is going to go nowhere. So, I mean, you know, we can work together and come up with a pay-for, and we can work with the White House too, but that's not happening now. I think just having this up or down vote tomorrow really is counterproductive.
Well, you've made a very passionate case, Mr. Pallone, for the value of some of these prevention dollars and some of the very long-term positive effects those dollars might have. I guess my concern is really about the short-term immediate effects that these dollars would have when we have families that were counting on this coverage, waiting on that 6-month clock to toll, planning to show up and get this coverage that they'd been promised and they have been turned away. Wouldn't it be more prudent for us to go ahead and pass this through the House, pass this through the Senate, get this to the President for his signature, and then come back and have that debate? I mean, if you...
But I don't think that's going to happen. I mean, I think it's quite clear just from the vote in the committee. I mean, even the more, we had some Democrats who didn't even vote for the Affordable Care Act who voted no on this proposal because I think they really believe that the prevention is important.
Mr. Little, I might say that the Secretary of HHS has complete discretion over the use of the prevention fund's money. And if she wanted to, tomorrow she could take the prevention fund and put in the PSIP fund to fund it fully, if she wanted to. She has that authority now.
That certainly seems, again, filling an immediate need over long-term need, give us an opportunity to come back and fill the long-term need later. Is there any support on your side of the aisle? Again, maybe there's a different proposal. I don't serve on the Committee of Jurisdiction, but outside of your funding amendment, though, Mr. Pallone, who else is providing leadership on this issue to try to help folks who are clearly not getting the help that I know you supported the bill, you believe that they needed?
Well, I think we just go back to the same thing again, and that is that it's wrong, I think, to just eliminate this prevention fund, which has some very good purposes. And it's easy, and I'm not trying to be critical, it's easy to say, okay, we got immediate needs, so let's, take the prevention fund. But we've been doing this now for several years to the point where there'll be nothing left. That's the problem.
Well, for those families that were counting on this coverage and they showed up in February, there was nothing left. And I wish we could reach out to those folks today. And I thank you, Mr. Pitts, for what you've done to do that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Nugent.
Just to build on Mr. Woodall's statement, what concerns me the most is that the people that need the coverage are the folks that, we all worry about. And they're the ones that if they can't go to the hospital, they can't get the medical coverage they need, they're the ones that are going to wind up being foreclosed on in their homes, having their car repossessed, not making bills. And here is the easiest fix ever, is to take tax money that's already being collected within the confines of this bill, the Affordable Health Care Act, and utilizing it to actually help people that need it right now, that are sitting here facing monumentous problems. Otherwise, I don't think it would even be in the bill to start with, but those that get excluded from insurance because of a pre-existing condition, I have a niece that falls under that category. And I think it's just a rotten shame that we have money sitting aside that was raised for the Affordable Health Care Act, and we're not going to utilize that money to protect people that need it the most. Women, children, and folks that need it the most, and keep them in their homes, and keep them working, and keep them in a way that they can be productive. This is just a travesty, because all we want to do now is just, we've already raised taxes. This bill raised taxes. The money's there. Why wouldn't we help the people when we have the opportunity to do it right now?
But what's
without
wrong?
playing a political game in regards to we're going to raise taxes on whatever. We have the money in the fund to do it today.
But why not use
right now?
Why not use a small tax that actually would discourage people from being chronically ill?
Well, I don't know that it actually has. Hey, listen, I wish I could lose 20 pounds, and I know what a proper diet would do, and I chose not to do it. I drink Coca-Cola, all right? Or I drink a beer. Or whatever I do, I make decisions for myself, and you can put all of it you want out there. People are still going to make decisions. They make decisions to smoke. They make decisions to do all kinds of things that are not good for themselves. But here you have an opportunity to actually help people immediately. The people that have been sitting there for 6 months hoping that they're going to get into this pool, and now you're saying, guess what? There's no water left in the pool. Sorry, too bad.
No, I'm not saying that. I'm simply saying I'd rather use some pay for that will actually prevent people from becoming high risk.
You have the money there now.
Well, wait a minute.
You have the money there now. It's not about going out and collecting another tax. You have the money there now.
Right, but as you say, it's all coming from some tax source, so why not use a source that will actually prevent chronic disease, which is the very thing that we're trying to deal with here.
Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Wait, before you yield back, would the gentleman yield for just 1 second?
I certainly will.
Mr. Turner, Nugent, your problem is that you're drinking Diet Coke. If you would drink Dr. Pepper, you wouldn't need these services at all.
Mr. Webster. Chairwoman is
Thank you so much, Mr. Chairman. And as we know, despite warnings, this Obamacare's pre-existing condition program was doomed from the start because the program was so badly structured, clearly unfunded. A July 2012 report from the consumer health group, Family USA, estimated that 484,500 people in my area, in South Florida, were uninsured because of the pre-existing condition issue. And as we now know from the debate that we've heard here this afternoon, only 107,000 people across this country were able to join these high-risk pools before number one, the money would run out, or before new members were denied. So now Obamacare can't even afford to help those $107,000. So those same people who couldn't get insurance, who can't have insurance for 6 months in order to be eligible for the program, will now lose access again if we don't act. So I congratulate Mr. Pitts for bringing this to our attention. And meanwhile, the administration is dipping into a slush fund that was never intended for their pet projects, whether it's advertising for Obamacare or a grant to push for Mayor Bloomberg's infamous soda ban to change people's behaviors, as my Florida colleague has said. So it's clear that the administration isn't going to use the Prevention and Public Health Fund for its intended use. So instead of letting the administration waste these taxpayer dollars, let's use that money to help people. Let's help those 107,000 folks who want to keep their health care and allow more of those suffering to enter these high-risk pools. So at the same time, we're putting an end to another piece of Obamacare, which is good for lots of folks and lots of businesses, and putting an end to this administration's slush fund and saving money over the long run. So I congratulate Mr. Pitts for bringing this to our attention. Thank you so much.
Could I just ask the gentlewoman for a minute?
Yes, to my good friend.
I just want to dispel this idea that the prevention fund is not being used for the purpose that it's designed. I mean, I can give you many examples in New Jersey, but, for grants. But, basically, the prevention fund has been used to target chronic diseases, which is exactly the type of thing that we're talking about here with the high-risk pool for diabetes, for heart disease, cancer, obesity, and also to detect and respond to disease outbreaks and disasters. All types of grants have gone to every state for those kinds of programs. So I don't want you to get the impression that it's not being used for those purposes. That's exactly what it's being used for.
I could claim my time. I realize that I think part of the intention is to change, do social engineering, change people's behaviors, get them to do what we think that they should do. And I'm not sure that that's the best way, the best intention of using taxpayer dollars, as altruistic as that might be, for you to use tax dollars to change my behaviors. I think that there are greater needs out there than to do it that way. Mr. Nugent, did you want some time?
Well, when you talk about changing behavior, prevention is great. And don't take this the wrong way. I truly believe that prevention is a good building block. But when you actually have people, while we don't know how prevention affects people particularly, but we know we have a group of people that have an immediate need. This isn't dreaming out here about what may happen. These are people that need it now. It's just hard to turn your back on people that need it now when you have the money sitting in an account that could pay for it.
It's a luxury we can't afford.
It is a luxury.
There's better uses for that. I yield back. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you very much. Dr. Burgess.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Pitts, refresh my memory. When did that letter go to the President about transferring money from the prevention fund to the high-risk pools?
It was 6 weeks ago.
6 weeks ago. And the response that you've gotten?
Nothing.
Okay, so today they have no trouble putting out a statement of administration policy within a few hours that said they're going to veto a bill to take care of people with pre-existing conditions when it's this president that sold this bogus health care law to us on the pretense that there were 8 to 12 million people in the country with pre-existing conditions that were wandering the land unable to find coverage. Look, $5 billion went into the pre-existing condition pool. Is that not right, Mr. Pallone? $5 billion when 3 years ago when the president signed the law?
Yeah, I don't think it was adequate, though, but again.
No, it wasn't adequate because in our committee, the chairman, ranking member Barton at the time, had introduced legislation that essentially built pre-existing condition pools or risk pools at the state level, and the price tag the CBO put on it was $20 billion for 5 years. So, yeah, it was intuitively obvious to the casual observer this was never going to work. And no one signed up for it. Remember a year ago, in advance of the Supreme Court ruling, the Health and Human Services was desperate. They were spending their dollars on advertising to get people to come in and sign up for the pre-existing program. It was bait and switch, because now it's not going to be available any longer. We heard that very compelling testimony from that young woman with lymphoma 4 weeks ago in committee. I mean, here she was waiting the 6-month wait period to age into the system because she had to be without insurance for 6 months. So she's counting the days, counting her dollars, paying for her treatments on credit cards and whatever cash she can scrape together. Shows up on the 1st of February and she's told, sorry, sister, we're closed. We're not going to do this anymore. So I just find it hard to believe that you can't reconcile both differing opinions. The president said pre-existing conditions were the most compelling reason to pass the Affordable Care Act, and then he walks away from it 8 months early. I mean, how do you justify that? And look, it's not the prevention fund. Let me just finish this point. The prevention fund has gone for all kinds of stuff. We heard it in committee, the bike paths, the spay and neutering stuff. But, I mean, in Washington Post 4 days ago, the administration announced this week that it would use nearly half of the 2013 prevention fund dollars to build the federal health exchanges. I mean, that's what's happening here. This is a piggy bank. They didn't get the money they wanted in the whatever budgetary alignment, so let's just take it from the prevention fund. They're not preventing diddly squat other than the American taxpayer having accountability for their dollars. I'll be happy to yield to that.
I mean, look, I respect you, but I just think that you're going all over the lot here and not being fair about this. Look, and let me explain why. First of all, you have this group of high-risk people that don't have health insurance. They didn't have health insurance before the ACA. So what do? In the ACA, we try to, first of all, eliminate pre-existing conditions as a basis for deciding, whether you get insurance or not, or how much you're charged for insurance. And that begins, gradually phases in and is complete by 2014. So we tried to address this thing over the long run by saying that it wouldn't be allowed to discriminate based on pre-existing conditions. So that was one way of dealing with it, which I think becomes very effective in 2014. Then we said, okay, in the meantime, before 2014, what are we going to do about these people? And we said, okay, we'll set aside some money. I would have liked to have seen more, but there were restrictions on the amount of money that was available.
If I reclaim my time, actually, you voted for the legislation that had only $5 billion.
Well, I mean, because what was my alternative? You were going to,
You could have gone to conference 3 years ago, and that was the fundamental error. We passed a bill that was basically a rough draft.
You didn't support it on either side. I mean, you do sometimes support some Democratic initiatives, so I shouldn't be so critical of you, but you didn't support this one.
No, I want you to give me full credit for trying to destroy the Affordable Care Act.
No,
I want you to go on the record right now and say, Dr. Burgess, you are personally responsible for the destruction of the Affordable Care Act. I would like to hear you say that.
You've actually voted with us a few times. If you want me to come in my district and tell you that you never vote with us, I will, but it wouldn't be true. The only thing that I'm trying to say, though, is this, and that is that it is true that a lot of people aren't aware of these programs. And so people weren't signing up for it because they weren't aware of it. So the secretary says, well, we've got to do some publicity to make people aware of it. So maybe she did too much, and now too many people became aware of it. But, it's the same thing. I mean, we have the same thing now. We have this money available to promote the exchanges and tell people about the exchanges and what's going to be available in 2014. And a lot of that money was cut with other bills that have come before the rules and gone to the floor. And now we don't have much money left to promote and explain what's going to happen in 2014. So all I'm trying to say is, you can't come to me and say, oh, there's a problem, and you're trying to address it, Congressman Pallone, but you didn't address it good enough. Meanwhile, you're not supportive of what we're doing. So, I mean, that's not really fair.
The fact of the matter is the administration has no problem taking money from the piggy bank of the prevention fund and building the exchanges because they underfunded the implementation money that they need for the exchange. I don't know what they've done with it. They will not give us a balance sheet showing how they have spent the money for the past 3 years for implementation. I would welcome it if Secretary Sebelius would provide us that information, but she won't. She declined again in committee last week. You were there. You heard it. I've tried for 3 years to get that information. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll yield back my time.
I'd like to point out that Dr. Burgess is eating chocolate M&Ms.
Thank you very much.
They're medicinal.
Appreciate the committee working through this. My observation may be, as many of you have heard, I now see the statement of administrative policy, and there could be no clearer way than to have rationing at this early date, which is what Republicans did say this would lead to. They would have to ration. And among other things, it's right in the President's statement that by and large says, oh my gosh, look, there's hard-working middle-class Americans that they deserve this, and we're not going to take it and give it to people who are sick. And that's exactly what Republicans said would happen. So, Mr. Pallone, if this administration continues to not want to find a way to pay for it, we'll hold them accountable. Republicans were here tonight to try and offer a way, a solution, legislatively, to get this done. I think that the President of the United States is hanging out big time on this. But if this is the precursor that you just don't have enough money and then we ought to go tax people more, that's what Republicans have said also that you would say. And
well, Mr. Chairman, if you just yield, keep in mind that before the ACA, these people were not getting coverage. So we did come up with a solution.
Well, you're denying them now.
I'm not denying them because I have a proposal to deal with it.
Well,
we'll
let the administration do that too. That's why we're here. And sometimes these things do happen in your lifetime. You find a way to have to live with what you have done, and I'm delighted. I want to thank both of you for being here this evening. I'm sure that there will be a vigorous opportunity on behalf of both of you and everyone else to participate tomorrow. As always, Mr. Chairman Pitts, Mr. Pallone, thank you for coming up. You've served this committee well over the last 15 years that I've been on it. You've made yourself available. You've stuck around. You didn't try and sneak out. You stayed and fought. And I want to say thank you to both of you. You're now excused. The chairman will now be, is there any other issue before the committee anybody wish before we receive a motion from the gentlewoman? Seeing none, gentlewoman from North Carolina is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the committee grant H.R. 1549, the Helping Sick Americans Now Act, a structured rule. The rule provides 1 hour general debate equally divided and controlled by the chair and ranking minority member of the Committee on Energy and Commerce. The rule waives all points of order against consideration of the bill. The rule makes an order as original text for the purpose of an amendment in the nature of a substitute, consisting of the text of Rules Committee Print 113-8, and provides that it shall be considered as read. The rule waives all points of order against the amendment in the nature of a substitute. The rule makes an order only those further amendments printed in the Rules Committee report. Each such amendment may be offered only in the order printed in the report, may be offered only by a member designated in the report, shall be considered as read, shall be debatable for the time specified in the report, equally divided and controlled by the proponent and an opponent, shall not be subject to amendment, and shall not be subject to a demand for division of the question. The rule waives all points of order against the amendments printed in the report. Finally, the rule provides one motion to recommit with or without instructions.
Thank you very much. You've now heard the motion by the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Gentleman from Texas, Dr. Birch is recognized to explain the rule.
This is a structured rule, provides for 1 hour debate controlled by the Committee on Energy and Commerce. The rule makes in order 2 amendments, one each from Republican and Democratic sponsors. 7 other amendments submitted to the committee were subject to points of order, including germaneness and Cutco violations. Mr. Chairman, I believe this is a fair rule, and I urge support.
Thank you very much. Is there any discussion or amendment to the motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I will make my usual amendment here to the rule. I would like to ask for an open rule to give all members of the House the opportunity to speak on this measure.
Gentlewoman has an amendment. Those in favor of the slaughter amendment, signify by saying aye. Those opposed, no.
No. Roll call.
Those have roll call.
Ms. Fox.
No.
Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Cole. Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Webster. Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Ross-Leitonen.
No.
Ms. Ross-Leitonen, no. Mr. Burgess. Mr. Burgess, no. Ms. Slaughter.
Aye.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern.
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings. Mr. Polis. Mr. Chairman.
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk report.
2 yeas, 9 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Further discussion on amendment?
Mr. Chairman,
Gentleman is recognized.
I have an amendment to the rule. I move the committee make an order en bloc and give the necessary waivers for amendments by Representative Capps, Pallone, Jean Green, Representatives Horsford, and Representative Schakowsky, numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 10.
You've now heard the amendment by the gentleman from Massachusetts, and the chair would not recommend making these in order because these amendments contain revenue provisions that were not germane and violated House rules, and thus I would not be in favor of revenue amendments being in an energy and commerce bill. Gentleman's recognized.
Yeah, I would just say that, as Mr. Pallone pointed out, we actually can decide whether these things, whether they get waivers or not, and whether they be able to be considered on the floor. So this committee has that power, and I think on something like this, we ought to vote for it, and I urge a aye vote.
Thank you very much. In fact, the gentleman is correct. The committee does have the latitude and the ability to do this. I refuse to have a tax increase at this time go through this committee. It's an energy and commerce bill, and I oppose tax increases to further on the massive tax increase that the Affordable Care Act has already placed on.
You could vote no.
And I appreciate the gentleman. Further discussion. Those in favor of the McGovern amendment will signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those no? No. The noes have it.
Ask for a roll call, Mr.
The gentleman asked for a roll call vote.
Ms. Fox? No. Ms. Fox, no. Mr. Bishop? No. Mr. Bishop, no. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, no. Mr. Woodall? No. Mr. Woodall, no. Mr. Nugent? No. Mr. Nugent, no. Mr. Webster? No. Mr. Webster, no. Ms. Ross-Leitinen? No. Ms. Ross-Leitinen, no. Mr. Burgess? No. Mr. Burgess, no. Ms. Slaughter?
Yes.
Ms. Slaughter, aye. Mr. McGovern?
Aye.
Mr. McGovern, aye. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Polis? Mr. Chairman?
No.
Mr. Chairman, no.
Clerk report.
2 yeas, 9 nays.
The amendment is not agreed to. Further amendment or discussion from the committee. Chairman now would move the motion from the gentlewoman from North Carolina. Those in favor would signify by saying aye. Aye. Those no?
No.
The ayes have it. The ayes have it.
May we have roll call?
We will have roll call.
Ms. Fox?
Aye.
Ms. Fox, aye. Mr. Bishop? Mr. Bishop, aye. Mr. Cole? Mr. Cole, aye. Mr. Woodall? Mr. Woodall, aye. Mr. Nugent? Mr. Nugent, aye. Mr. Webster? Mr. Webster, aye. Ms. Ross-Leitinen?
Aye.
Ms. Ross-Leitinen, aye. Mr. Burgess? Mr. Burgess, aye. Ms. Slaughter?
No.
Ms. Slaughter, no. Mr. McGovern?
No.
Mr. McGovern, no. Mr. Hastings? Mr. Polis? Mr. Chairman?
Aye.
Mr. Chairman, aye.
Clerk report.
9 yeas, 2 nays.
The motion is agreed to. The gentleman from Texas, Dr. Burgess, will lead for the Republicans.
And I have that pleasure for the minority.
And the gentlewoman, the ranking member of the committee, will have the duty for the Democrats. The next meeting will be tomorrow at 3 o'clock on the Responsible Helium Administration and Stewardship Act. We're now in recess.